Welcome to the place where money, power, and history collide. And remember, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Today, we will tell you the story of a man far richer than Jeff Bezos, so powerful and difficult to control that at the peak of his career, the United States government was forced to create special laws just to restrain him because bringing him under control was nearly impossible. In today's terms, his fortune would be worth approximately $280 billion, amounting to nearly 1.5% of America's total economic output at the time. So what was the secret behind this immense wealth? The answer lies in a company called Standard Oil. At its peak, Standard Oil controlled nearly 90% of America's oil refineries and pipelines during an era when oil demand was exploding. Historically, in families that own such massive companies, wealth usually erodes to about 10% by the third generation. Yet the Rockefeller family, owners of this enormous fortune, remains one of the richest and most influential families in the world even today. So, how was this possible? Although much of what was done was legal, being legal did not necessarily mean being ethical. This is the story of John D. Rockefeller. A century before technology giants and financial empires ruled the world, when power and wealth were mentioned, Rockefeller was among the first names that came to mind. Today, we will discuss his rise, his strategies, his darker side, and ultimately the legacy he left behind, because this is not merely a story of wealth, but the story of capitalism in its rawest form, how power is built, how an empire survives across generations. John was born in 1839 in the small town of Richford, New York, as an ordinary child. It would have been nearly impossible to predict that he would become one of America's most famous figures and the owner of an extraordinary fortune. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, was far from a positive role model. Known as a quack doctor and a con artist, William lived a life filled with mystery and deception, selling fake medicines of his own making. He desired success, or at least the appearance of respectability. Rumors linked him to gangs and even horse theft, yet he always dressed impeccably and paid great attention to his appearance. He was certainly not a trustworthy man. Until the family settled in Cleveland, Ohio in 1857, they were constantly on the move, always fleeing one place and starting over in another. The large, comfortable house his father bought became their permanent home. Cleveland also offered John opportunities he could never have found in the more established and competitive markets of the East Coast. At the time, Cleveland was rapidly growing, dynamic, uncertain, but full of potential. John D. Rockefeller lived a simple life and spent his childhood in an ordinary town. He attended school for a few months each year and spent the rest of his time playing and working. He completed every task with extreme care and precision. Intelligent, yet modest and unassuming, he chopped wood, tended horses, and raised chickens and turkeys. People had little to say about him because he did not stand out. His most noticeable trait was his quiet and calm nature. His first job was not impressive either. He earned only 50 cents a day, considered a very low wage, working as a bookkeeping assistant after leaving high school. Yet he had a long-term plan. He saved every penny and eventually borrowed money from his father. What mattered was not just the loan, but how he combined it with his savings to take his first serious step into the business world. In 1859, Rockefeller founded a commodities and commission firm and began trading goods and petroleum products. The company was called Clark and Rockefeller. At a time when the American oil industry was just beginning to rise, this was a remarkably smart move. Cleveland's proximity to the Pennsylvania oil fields made it an ideal refining hub. By 1863, Rockefeller and his partners had accumulated enough capital to open their own refineries, and business was booming. At this point, you might expect the story to follow the classic American dream narrative, two young men rising from humble beginnings to success. But that is not what happened. From the very beginning, Rockefeller revealed himself to be a ruthless businessman. Just 2 years into the venture, he partnered with chemist Samuel Andrews, bought out one of his partners, and reorganized the company. Needing more capital, Rockefeller turned to millionaire Stephen Harkness, who invested $100,000 on the condition that he remain a silent partner. They were also required to accept Henry Flagler, a relative, as a partner. This turned out to be a a brilliant decision, as Flagler's organizational skills perfectly complemented Rockefeller's financial discipline and strategic vision. By 1870, Rockefeller had entered Ohio's elite circles as a powerful and influential young man. That year marked the true foundation of his industrial empire. At just 31 years old, he founded the company that would make him one of the richest individuals in history, Standard Oil. Rockefeller ran it with ruthless efficiency and unmatched strategy, opening the oil age to the world. Unlike other oil companies, Standard Oil pursued a different strategy. Instead of focusing on risky drilling and extraction, it concentrated on refining, offering stable costs and predictable profits. Rockefeller was obsessed with cutting costs and eliminating waste. His goal was not merely to produce oil, but to dominate the entire market. He recruited the brightest minds of the era, heavily invested in research and development, and relentlessly consolidated internal operations. Standard Oil expanded aggressively by exploiting refinery byproducts and purchasing facilities competitors considered worthless. For example, Rockefeller acquired sulfur-rich crude oil fields in Ohio, deemed useless at the time. His team found ways to turn waste into enormous profit. This ability to see value where others saw nothing became the signature of his rise. But this was only part of his success. Rockefeller did not settle for market leadership. He sought complete monopoly. In 1872 alone, Standard Oil systematically eliminated its rivals. In the first quarter of that year, it absorbed, shut down, or bankrupted 22 of its 26 competitors. By guaranteeing the transport of 60 oil railcars per day, Rockefeller secured special rebates from railroads, giving him an unbeatable advantage. With shipping costs kept extraordinarily low, competitors without similar leverage simply could not survive. His influence extended beyond business. Through schemes like the South Improvement Company, he attempted to control transportation costs and manipulate the market in his favor. Public outrage followed. Massive protests erupted, and despite his political influence, Rockefeller could not stand against public pressure. By the late 1880s, Standard Oil controlled nearly 90% of American oil refining. But a storm was approaching. Excessive monopolization and public scandals pushed lawmakers to introduce antitrust legislation. Railroad rebates were banned, and under the Sherman Antitrust Act, Standard Oil was declared illegal. In 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered the company to be broken into 34 independent entities, a historic decision. At 56, Rockefeller withdrew from daily operations and remained only as a symbolic chairman. The stress of managing the empire had taken a severe toll on his health. Journalist Ida Tarbell famously described him as the most miserable man in the world. His hair loss and pale appearance became symbols of the moral cost of his wealth. This marked a turning point. Rockefeller began shifting toward philanthropy and giving back to society. The founding of the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913 symbolized his transition from industrial titan to philanthropist. The foundation focused on three core areas: public health, education, and scientific research. Rockefeller funded the University of Chicago and the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, which became leaders in biomedical science. The foundation played a major role in developing vaccines against diseases such as meningitis and yellow fever, transforming medical education in the United States and helping establish China's first modern medical school. In 1918 and 1921, public health centers were founded at Johns Hopkins and Harvard universities, launching hygiene and health education campaigns in impoverished regions. Rather than small donations, the foundation targeted root causes, expanding its influence far beyond healthcare. As a key supporter of the Green Revolution, it is said to have helped save nearly 1 billion lives by improving global agricultural productivity. Rockefeller left only a small portion of his fortune to his children, donating most of it instead. In 1912, his wealth was nearly $900 million, but by his death only $26 million remained. This strategic philanthropy reshaped the Rockefeller name, from ruthless monopolist to benevolent benefactor. But were these contributions purely altruistic, or were there deeper motives? Tax advantages, reputation repair, political influence. The truth is complex. While intentions may be debated, the benefits were real. Millions gained access to health, education, and improved living standards. Today, the Rockefeller family's wealth is estimated by Forbes at $10.3 billion, though some believe it is far higher, hidden across trusts and investments. Their political influence has been immense, shaping global policy through philanthropy and strategic positioning. Modern monopolies may look different: Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, but capital power has not disappeared. It has evolved. Rockefeller's life proves that with enough intelligence, ruthlessness, and strategy, systems can be bent. Empires may fall, but legacies remain, and that is why John D. Rockefeller is still discussed, still analyzed, still debated. He was not just a businessman, he was the embodiment of capitalism at its most ruthless and most successful. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to subscribe to the channel.